Our study of the invisible war. It's a war that, as believers, we all fight, whether we realize it or not. And we focused quite a bit on the war inside, but we're also looking at the world and the things that happen outside that are part of the struggle that we have. And today, we want to focus on what happens when your world falls apart. You know, the truth is, all of us have had things happen that just shake us, don't they? Things that bring us to our knees, things that seem like it's just too much, it's more than I can handle. In this day and age, so many struggle. Suddenly they go into work or they get notice, a phone call, and they've been laid off. Totally unexpected. What do you do? Or you go to the doctor and you get that diagnosis that's so scary. Cancer or some terminal disease or some condition that's debilitating. Whereas also is so common, seemingly without warning, maybe a spouse just walks out and leaves, or even worse, suddenly your spouse, your partner through life dies. What do you do in times like that? That's part of the struggle. That's part of the invisible war. Today I want us to consider the prophet Jeremiah and how he dealt with this. He lived during a terrible time in the nation of Israel, and especially Judah's history. There was this terrible enemy, Babylon, that was terrorizing them. They were brutal. His people were being taken captive, forced into slavery, taken off to another country. They saw terrible brutality and atrocities committed on a massive scale. Many of them experienced these things and had family members and others who did not survive them. Because of all that was going on, the whole infrastructure of the country, the economy was in shambles. People were starving to death. The whole nation was in disarray. It was declining and in danger of being completely wiped out. And during this whole time, Jeremiah wrote 2 books that we have in the Bible. The book of Jeremiah, and then also the book of Lamentations. And that's an interesting word, lamentation. It's not a word we use very often in English today. It's an older English word that really means, one aspect anyway, is to complain. To complain. So you can call this the book of complaints, because really that's what it is. And it's lamenting is when I unload all my cares before God, and maybe I'm complaining about them to Him. You know, when I unload my sin to God, that's called confession. When I'm complaining to God about all that's going on in my life, just being honest about how I'm feeling, that's a lament. That's lamenting. And this book is really, Lamentations is just a book of Jeremiah's complaints. Not just complaints generally, but they're complaints against God from Jeremiah. Much of this. And so, in one sense, it's not the most positive book. You can encounter some verses that are not very positive at all. But in the middle of the book, there's this positive message on what to do when everything falls apart, when your world falls apart, when your plans fall through, and how you rebuild your life in the midst of all that. So we're going to look today at Lamentations 3. And we're just going to go through verse by verse. And there are 6 lessons that Jeremiah learned here. 6 steps that provide some guidance for us on how to rebuild our world when it falls apart. And the first one is to unload all my frustration on God. If you're looking in your outline in the bulletin insert, that's number 1, that first blank. Unload all my frustration on God. What's that mean? Just tell God exactly how you feel. You know what? He can handle it. He can certainly handle your complaint. And Jeremiah doesn't pull any punches. I mean, he just lets it out. He's bold. He lets out his anger against God in full fury. He just cries out. You remember, unloading my sins is confession. That's good. We need to do that. But sometimes we need to unload those complaints too, don't we? That's lamenting. Lamentations 3, 1 through 10. Jeremiah says, I am a man who has seen affliction. By the rod of his wrath path. He has driven me away and made me walk in darkness rather than light. He has turned his hand against me again and again, all day long. He has made my skin grow cold and broken my bones. He has surrounded me with bitterness and hardship. He has made me dwell in darkness like the dead. He has walled me in so I cannot escape. He has weighed me down with chains. Even when I call out or cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has barred my way with blocks of stone. He has made my paths crooked. That's in the Bible. Can you believe that? Who's he talking about? He's talking about God. Do you think God can handle that? He can. He can handle Jeremiah's anger, and he can handle your anger. And really this whole book, as we said, is just one long complaint against God. So Jeremiah is talking it out. He's blowing off steam here. He's letting it out. It says in Lamentations 3:17 and 18, I cannot find peace or remember happiness. I tell myself, I am finished. I can count on the Lord. I can't count on the Lord. I can't count on the Lord to do anything for me. Wow. That's in the Bible. Can you believe that? You ever felt that way? Now, when we come here, we put on our best face, right? Oh, I've never felt that way. You ever come to the end of yourself, or the end of that circumstance, or the end of that tragedy, the end of that pain, the end of that whatever it is, and you say, Lord, I've had it. All right, this is enough. Where are you? Why are you not coming through? That's what he's doing here. The Lord can handle all that too. You know, many of us here, we have kids, or we have grandkids, which means we had kids at one point, right? And you've certainly been around kids. And have you ever had your child, especially when they're real young, throw that temper tantrum? Huh? Amen. My dad used to laugh and tell me, boy, you used to throw tantrums like I've never seen. Said you would hold your breath and turn blue and pass out. Said I got sick of it. I just got me a cup of cold water every time you do it. Splash! But did he love me any less for having that temper tantrum? He might not like the tantrum, but you didn't love the children any less when they threw the tantrum, right? Well, God's the same way. We still love our kids when they throw tantrums. We realize they're immature, they don't know, and that we really do know what's best for them. No matter how old they get, right? Well, God, remember, God is the same. He's far better at it than you and I. But God doesn't owe you an explanation for everything that happens in your life. God is God, and you know what? You're not. I'm not. And a lot of things are going to happen in our lives that we're never going to understand until we get to heaven. And when we get to heaven, we're going to go, oh, okay, now I see. That's why. You know, Jesus told his disciples, you don't understand now what's happening, but you will later. And that is so true for all of us in life. Most of the things in our life, most of the things in life that happen to you, you're not going to understand why. Not why you're here. Not in this sinful life. You're just not going to understand why. And God's not going to give you an explanation now. Even if he did, you know what you'd do? Okay, I understand. I still don't like it. I don't want it. Right? That's how we would probably respond, even if we knew the why of it. And it wouldn't change anything. So, it's okay. It's not the best strategy to throw a temper tantrum, but God can handle it. And he's not going to love you any less when you throw that fit. He's God. And if an imperfect parent like us can love our kids even when they throw a fit, how much more does God? That's the truth. And so we unload all our frustrations on God. And second, I turn my focus from my pain to God's love. I turn my focus from my pain to God's love. Jeremiah says in Lamentations, the thought of my pain and my homelessness is bitter poison. I think of it constantly, and my spirit is depressed. Yet hope returns when I remember this one thing. The Lord's unfailing love and mercy still continue. Fresh as the morning, as sure as the sunrise. The Lord is all I have, so in Him I put my hope. You know, he says, the thought of my pain is like bitter poison. Have you experienced that? Bitterness is a poison in us. It's a poison that hurts you. It doesn't hurt anybody else. The person that maybe you're bitter against, the person that you're resentful against, the person you have that grudge against, that person you despise, guess what? They're not even thinking about you. And the bitterness is only making you miserable. It's a self-inflicted wound. It's a bitter poison, and that poison will eat you up. And sometimes our circumstances can make us bitter, can't they? Well, listen, you're not going to get over your depression until you stop being bitter. Bitterness never gets you where you want to be. You're not going to get over your depression until you let that go. Whatever that thing is, that pain, that disappointment, that frustration, whatever it is, that injustice, whatever it is, you're not going to stop being depressed until you learn to let it go, to release it, to forgive if you need to forgive someone. Bitterness keeps you caught in your own pain. Whatever that pain is, the pain of the offense, the pain of the circumstance, the pain of the tragedy, the pain of the loss. Bitterness keeps you reliving it over and over, and it gets worse, and it turns toxic, and it becomes a poison, and it will destroy you. The longer I think about it, the more depressed I get, Jeremiah is saying here. So it's really simple in a way. The more you think about it, the more depressed you get. Well, then change the way you think, right? Change the way you think. He says, he shows us the switch where he turns his focus from his pain to God's love. He says, yet hope returns. Yet hope returns. How does hope return? Well, when I've lost everything, when my world is falling apart or seems to be falling apart, how does hope return? Hope returns when I remember this one thing. The Lord's unfailing love and His mercy still continue, fresh as the morning, as sure as the sunrise. The Lord is all I have, so in Him I put my hope. So no matter what, His unfailing love is there in your life. You know, even when you are shaking your fist at God and throwing your complaints and your accusations, you know what He's responding with? His unfailing love. That is amazing, isn't it? God, I'm telling you how terrible everything is right now, how my life is messed up, and you still love me. And the one thing I can count on, no matter what, is that you're going to love me, and that it's as fresh as the morning and it's as sure as the sunrise every day. The Lord is all I need. The Lord is all I have, so I put my hope in Him. That's what Jeremiah said. You know, you don't know that God is all you need. Often it seems this is true, and it is true. You don't know that God is all you need until God is all you have. So sometimes God allows us to lose everything. Sometimes He's got to put you flat on your back before you look up, right? And then you realize what? All I really have is God. And then you realize, but He's all I really need. So if you've got Him, you have what you need, all you need, and He's going to take care of everything else. So in this, you turn your focus from your pain, dwelling on it, replaying it, and you shift that focus to God's love. Lamentations 3:31. The Lord is merciful, and He will not reject us forever. He may bring us sorrow, but His love for us is sure and strong. He takes no pleasure in causing us grief or pain. So when you're going through that terrible pain, whatever it is, what's God doing? He's feeling it with you. He's grieving with you. When you're going through loss, what is God doing? He's feeling it. He takes no pleasure in that loss. He takes no pleasure at all in your pain. So what do? Well, I unload all that on Him. I unload those frustrations, all of that I feel. I just put it off on Him. And then, even though I might be mad at Him, I remind myself of the truth. He loves me, and I take my focus off my pain, and I put it on His love. I take it off my problems, and I put it on Him, and I focus on His love. And then, number 3, I get along with God and wait. Get along with God and wait. Lamentations 3, 28 through 29. This is the Message paraphrase. When life is heavy and hard to take, go off by yourself, enter the silence, bow in prayer, don't ask questions, wait for hope to appear. Waiting on God is something none of us likes to do, right? But it's a spiritual discipline. It's a habit that we've got to cultivate. We've got to learn this habit of life. If we're going to handle any of the stress, any of the problems, any of the difficulties and challenges of life, we have to learn to wait on God. So sit down, be quiet, and listen. You have to take time to be quiet and let God speak to you. And it's just about impossible in this day and age. We are programmed to be demanding entertainment and mental stimulus at all times, right? So we've got cell phones and computers and iPads and iPods and all kinds of stuff blaring and going. There's never any silence. There's never any waiting. It's just constantly this and that. And everybody's multitasking and doing all this stuff and accomplishing nothing. You have to make time to be quiet and let God speak. It's essential. Do you realize that He wants to talk to you? He does. God wants to communicate to you, and He does so primarily through His book. The problem is, we're too busy. It's like, I haven't heard this in a long time, when you'd make a phone call and occasionally you get this thing, all circuits are busy. Do you remember that? That's how our minds are. All circuits are busy. It's already loaded with all kinds of garbage, nonsense. Not all of it's bad, it's just full, constantly. We're just too busy to focus on God. So when God's speaking, is He getting a busy signal from you? In order to focus, you've got to remove those distractions. Turn it off. You don't need Fox News blaring in the living room or the den 24/7. I'm sorry, you don't. You know, it repeats like every 30 minutes. I don't know if you realize that. So turn it off. Enter the silence. Determine you're going to be receptive, listening, ready to hear whatever He says. God, I want to hear you. I want to hear from you. I'm eager, I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm teachable. Yes, speak to me. That's the attitude. Jesus gave very similar advice, Matthew 6:6. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you'll begin to sense His grace. That grace we just sang about. Amazing grace. So I challenge you this week, every day this week, would you get alone with God for 10 minutes and listen? 10 minutes. That's a long time, isn't it? To sit there listening quietly to God. Try to put those distractions out of your head. Just pray at the beginning and say, Lord, I'm listening. What do you have to say? And as a prompt, as a help, God speaks through His Word. So just pick up the Psalms. Start with Psalm 1. And just allow yourself at least a couple of minutes to just put things aside. Intentionally put the stress, the distractions, whatever is consuming your thought, just push it aside for a minute to say, Lord, here I am, speak. And just begin in the Psalms. You could just progress through the Psalms this whole week. Just begin in Psalm 1 and read it. Let the Lord speak to you through that. He's speaking. He has something to say. And there will be verses that will jump off the page and the Lord will say, see, right there. That's what I want for you today, this minute, right now. So do that, 10 minutes each day. And the focus will shift, as it says, from you to God. And you will begin to sense His grace. Have you noticed when you're waiting how things seem to slow down? You ever been in, a hospital waiting room or the doctor's office? It just is like time, just like you've gone into a black hole. It just stretches, minutes turn into years. You know what I'm talking about? That's a good thing when you're seeking the Lord. Because the truth is, we're so busy, we're stressed out, there is never any rest for our souls or our minds. We're harried and harassed by constant bombardment from all kinds of distractions and other things. We need this. Lamentation 3:25 and 26 says, the Lord is good to everyone who trusts in Him. So it is best for us to wait in patience, to wait for Him to save us. God's timing is perfect. It's never anything but perfect. Wait in patience. Wait for Him to save. Now circle those two waits there in your notes, your sermon notes. The word wait. Both times He's underscoring the importance of waiting. Before you go out, knee-jerk, off the cuff, reacting to some problem that you're going to solve yourself, before you step out and try to rebuild your life on your own, you need to just sit down and wait. Wait on God to save you. Wait for His solution. Guaranteed, His solution is better than anything you can come up with on your own. And we've all seen war movies, right? Where these military battles where the good guys are outnumbered 10 to 1 and by the enemy, and the enemy's marching, coming towards them with overwhelming force. And we don't have enough bullets, we don't have enough guns, we don't have enough arrows, we don't have enough spears, whatever it is. You don't have enough. And the great leader, the wise general, the commander, he says, you guys do not fire until I tell you. William Prescott in the Battle of Bunker Hill at the beginning of the Revolutionary War says, don't fire until you see the white of their eyes. In other words, we're not going to waste one bullet. We're going to make every shot count. Every arrow has got to count. Whatever it is, it's got to count. We're going to make sure we don't miss. So the enemy's coming. The enemy's marching. And they're getting closer and closer and closer. And you feel the pressure of that you are totally outnumbered. There's no way you can handle it on your own. And they're coming closer and closer. And the leader is saying, wait, wait, wait. Don't shoot, wait. And they're so close. They're coming. And you're aiming. And there's 10 for every one of you. And he's saying, wait, wait, wait. And finally he says, now. And with the right timing, the battle is won. But you will lose the battle every time if you do it on your time. The only way you're going to win is if, in all the battles and challenges of life, is if you do it according to God's perfect timing. And to have His timing, you have to wait on Him. You have to wait on Him. He's telling you to wait. Wait on me. The next thing God tells you to do, once you've said, I'm ready and I'm waiting, there are things that you do while you're waiting. We change the things that we can change. Change the things I can change. You know, there are a lot of things in life you can't change. And the only way you can overcome some things is just by accepting the reality of what is. You face the facts, trusting God, and you, in doing so, by faith, you overcome discouragement. So one key to peace in your life is to accept what can't be changed. But on the other hand, there are quite a few things that can be changed. I do change what I can change. What can I change? What can I change? Well, think of all those things we said at the beginning. I've lost my job. My spouse has left me. My spouse suddenly passed away. I have this diagnosis of this terrible disease, whatever it may be. You can't change those things, but you can change you. You can be better. You don't have to be bitter. But that requires some honesty with yourself, some self-evaluation. And so you look at yourself and find out what's wrong with me. What do I need to change about me? Lamentation 3:40. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. That's the kind of change that we can make. So we do this spiritual and relational inventory. Is there anything broken in my relationship with God? Is there anything that's undermining my walk with Him? Is there any relationship that's broken that I can do something to try to make right, to seek reconciliation or restoration? You know, when your world falls apart, all these emotions come. Through all those things, those powerful, intense emotions come. Grief, anger, confusion, doubt, all these things come. But you know what the most damaging of all those emotions is? Fear. Fear paralyzes. Many of you remember Ann Landers. She wrote that advice column for decades. She got over 10,000 letters a week. She said the most common problem people wrote about was fear. Everything was related to a fear of this or a fear of that. You know, Jeremiah, who wrote this book of complaints, these lamentations, he had a lot of reasons to fear. He was God's prophet, and he had an incredibly unpopular message. He's saying, God's judgment is coming, and you deserve it. We deserve it because we walked away from God. Nobody wanted to hear that. What they wanted to hear is God's going to come through and rescue us before we're utterly destroyed. And that was not the message God gave him. So he had reason to be afraid. He suffered for preaching that message. They literally threw him down in a dark pit in a well. And he was terrified. Listen to what he says. My enemies threw me into a pit and dropped stones on me. The water flowed above my head, and I cried out, this is the end. But I called on your name, Lord, from deep within the well, and you heard me. You listened to my pleading. You heard my weeping. Yes, you came at my despairing cry and told me, do not fear. Fear not. You know, there are 365 fear nots in the Bible. Isn't that good? One for every day of the year. Because the one thing God does not want you to do is to be afraid. You can be angry at God. You can be frustrated. You can gripe. You can moan. You can complain. You can question. But God says, don't you dare be afraid. Do not fear. That really relates to the next thing that we do in this process of rebuilding our lives. We ask God to relieve my fears. Ask God to relieve my fears. So Jeremiah did that. He said, I called on your name, and you listened to my pleading. You listened to my pleading. That's what he did. David did the same thing. Psalm 34:4. I prayed to the Lord, and he answered me, freeing me from all my fears. And then Psalm 27:13. I would have despaired unless I had believed that I'd see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. God will relieve your fears if you ask Him. Remember at the beginning of World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. That's a great speech, but it's not really true when you think about what happened in World War II. There was a lot to fear. Horrible. The horror of war. Eventually the atomic bomb. There's a lot to fear. Everybody has fears. Some we acknowledge, some we don't. Some are hidden. But the antidotes to fear are the same, whether they're hidden or they're realized. How do we overcome it? We overcome it by the truth The truth, remember, will set you free. You need to know the truth. In fact, most of the fears that we have, we weren't born with those fears. We learned them through experience and through circumstance and through what other people do to us and what life has thrown to us. We learn to be afraid. And you can unlearn fears. And the way that you unlearn them is to learn the truth about who God is and what He's done, and He has a plan for you, and that He will never leave you or forsake you. The truth will set you free from your fears. Another antidote to fear is love. Perfect love casts out fear, all fear. Think of the illustration of a parent whose home is on fire with their children. Their young children are in that home. Parents with that deep love for their children will risk their life like that. Their love for their child will overcome that fear of dying in that burning building. Perfect love, God's love, casts out fear. The more you love, the less you fear. Love and fear do not go together this way. And then faith. Faith really doesn't remove that feeling of being afraid. It gives you the strength, though, as you trust God by faith to move forward in spite of the fear. That's what courage really is. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what must be done even though you are afraid. That's courage. And faith is like that. So one of the reasons God has brought you here today is to tell you, don't be afraid. You don't have to live that way. You don't have to fear. I don't want you to fear. Do not fear. Maybe your fear is, this is never going to change. I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to find another job. I'm never going to beat this disease. I'll never be with my spouse again. You're hopeless. Maybe you think, I am too far gone. I am broken. I am not able to be fixed. But God has a plan. And He is a master of bringing good out of calamity and tragedy. Don't fear. And the sixth part of rebuilding our life is to expect Jesus to restore my life. Expect Jesus to restore my life. Pray what Jeremiah prayed in Lamentations 5:21. Restore us, O Lord, and bring us back to you again. Give us back the joys we once had. Maybe it all seems hopeless to you, whatever that thing is, or maybe it's multiple things. It just seems like there's no way for it to be recovered or to be made right. Jesus is in the business of restoration, of reconditioning, of recovery. He is in the business of making all things new. Remember what He said? I came to seek and to save that which was lost when it seemed hopeless. That's what He does. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old is gone. New things have come. He specializes in making all things new. Psalm 71:20, you have allowed me to suffer much hardship, but you will restore me to life again and lift me up from the depths of the earth. Isn't that good? Like Jeremiah in that pit, like David cried out in Psalm 40, bring me up out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay. That's what the Lord does. He brings you up out of that dark hole where it seems there's no light, and no hope. He does it. You should memorize Lamentations 3:24. Deep in my heart, I say, the Lord is all I need. I can depend on Him. That's an easy verse to memorize. You ought to let that be just that constant prayer this week as you go through whatever it is you're facing. Deep in my heart, I say, the Lord is all I need. I can depend on Him. You know what? Life is constantly changing. And bad stuff happens to good people. And tragedies obviously create even more change in our lives, don't they? But there are some things that never change. This is one of them. The Lord is all I need. I can depend on Him. That is the anchor. He is the anchor. He doesn't change. And He's promised He'll be there. So you anchor yourself to that truth, to these certainties, these unchanging truths, this reality. Remember, God is still in control, even when you're not. And you know, we have free will. We have the ability to choose. And yet God still controls how it all works out. And we get afraid and stuff seems to spiral out of control. When we look and we see Ebola is here in the United States of America, and on it goes, one fear after another. It just seems like it's just out of control. But God is in control. He will handle all that concerns you. You can't control so much of these things that bring fear into your life. There's really not much you can do about it. You can't control that thing that happened, but you can control how you react, how you respond to it, and what your attitude will be in the midst of it, right? That's all He's calling you to do, to trust Him in the midst of that thing, whatever it is. I can't handle everything. Can you? I can't. But I don't have to. God will handle it. He will. The key to making it through that crisis, to control in the crisis, is that Christ is in control. You see? Remember, God is all I need. I don't have to know the answers. He knows them. And I know so many of you, you're struggling in multiple ways, some of you. And it's bad, and you're hurting. I want to pray for you now. We're going to have a song of invitation in a minute. I'll ask John to go ahead and prepare for that. But let me pray for